you put together for people to go and see and kind of see the data as it comes out, as it's being reported. Going through it, I mean, it was a fascinating read to see how the data's tracked, how it's like how the different words are pulled out. Can you describe the way that the reports are put together a little bit?
Sure. It's actually quite tedious.
Yes.
But I have this program that is written in Lisp, which is one of the languages of artificial intelligence, along with Prolog, and that loads this software called IntelliCAD, which is a CAD-CAM program, and it allows you to construct an artificial reality to your specifications, basically a model of a 3D space. So I've created this giant 3D aquarium within the computer that I can twist and turn and go and look at, and I populate it with little pixels, turning the color relative to particular emotional parameters, and the intensity relative to other parameters, and the hue relative to other parameters again, and their placement within this 3D space relative to a whole different set of parameters. And when I see a lot of these curious clusterings of similar colors and hues and so on, I go and poke at those little pixels and get a number back, and that allows me to go back to this giant lexicon of words and see what word is associated with that particular pixel. And that word is always associated with a context and cluster of words. We're dealing with very intense fuzzy set theory here, and then I go and I pick out, based on certain of those hue and intensity values, which one of the primary aspect and attributes of that word appear to be within the that particular area. Yes. And we cluster them all together, and they kind of tell us a story, or they don't. Usually if they don't, we kind of wait because it might populate further, and that's happened before, and then that story might become evident. So it's kind of like waiting to be offered to buy a vowel. You just have to wait for more data to come on in and fill it out.
Right.
If you get a complete story, then usually it's going to happen in a relatively short period of time. And that's what we mean by we start getting hints of things long way out.
Jeez. To get the idea that, and this is something that happened to me just the other day. I had been up all night long. I was working on a bunch of stuff here for the station, and I was on my way home, and I come up to a red light, and I'm sitting there at this red light. I'm turning right. There's a car sitting next to me. It's turning left. There's only two ways you can go. We're sitting there at the red light, and I'm extremely tired. And something starts going through my mind. I started thinking, the light's going to turn green. The car in front of me is going to go to make his left-hand turn. I'm going to go take my right-hand turn, and a truck's going to come along and hit this car. Why it popped in my head, I have no idea. It just did. I just saw it in my mind. Light turns green. I start to go. The gentleman next to me starts to go. And sure enough, a truck runs the red light and almost hits this guy. I mean, it was so close. And I thought, what the hell? Did I just have a psychic moment? Or did me thinking it cause it to happen? I mean, I couldn't help but think that. Now, if we take it on a collective scale, one has to ask yourself, well, are we predicting the future? Is it a mass scale? Or are we
creating?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always that conundrum. It presents itself in science fiction from the 40s and all the way up to where we are now. Yeah. And I frequently thought about it. At some level, we must be co-creators, yes. But at other levels, it's so complex that my 40 frames per second mind cannot be creating it on an instant-by-instant basis. And people who believe that they're 40 frame per second creating in real time, if you will, are likely to fall into these traps, like the people that predict the arrival of the spaceship tomorrow, that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah, well, yeah, or 2012 for that matter. Yes.
Yeah, but there's some subtle differences there that suggest that is certainly an issue arising outside of our ability to control. Humans don't control circumstances. Yes. The only thing that really controls our attitude to it.
Yes.
And there's a whole lot of stuff going on in the solar system. The giant heliosphere surrounding us, as the Russians have demonstrated, is growing at huge rates these last couple of years. So there's external evidence that we're entering an energetic period of space that we've never been in before,
yes,
as conscious beings. So this is going to prove quite the interesting little bit of a ride, I think.
Right. Very, very. Well, when we take into account UFOs, the 2012 aspect of it all, what's your personal stance on things like that? Where do you stand as far as your personal opinion?
Well, see, there's the rub. I try not to believe anything.
Yes.
Because as a linguist, I recognize that the word believe means I wish this, whatever, to be true.
Yes.
And it goes down to a root level that I don't wish to explore reality with. I don't want to see reality through my own projections. I want it to reveal itself to me.
Yes.
And this is basically the tenet of such thinkers as the Complete Reality School of Taoism and the Patanjali yogis. You just want to see what it is and deal with it as a mature adult, if you will. And so there's some things I know evidentially that suggest we're in for a time of radical changes. And for instance, your recent experience with this truck may be an example of that. And if you'll think about it, invite yourself to examine the idea of what we call sync winks, or synchronistic winks from universe in your life. And that was one of them. It gave you a wink, and that little wink was this instant bit of knowledge, a little flash of a scene that appeared within a few seconds, or maybe a minute at most, of actually receiving that. Now start thinking about and observing, and you'll find that as we go forward in time, you're going to start getting more and more and more of those. I have personally experienced an increase in telepathic response and projection with those around me that I'm in association with frequently. And a lot of my fellows are also saying this. And I do meditation and so on, and I know my meditation levels have really increased in the last 6 to 8 months, as have these telepathic instances, including with people that would not normally be aware of the telepathy component of their life, or the psychic component.
Yes.
So I believe that, or I don't believe, I find that there's evidence to suggest that a premise can be made that this energetic area of space that we're in is indeed increasing vibrations that we can pick up and respond to and use at this current point to at least increase the novelty of what's going on with things.
Well, when that happened for me, right after it happened, the immediate thing that I did is I paid attention to what time it was. And as soon as I got home, the first thing I started doing is, okay, let's take a look at the planetary alignments. Let's take into account the day, the location, the geographical, in a sense,
right.
And this may be a little excessive, I don't know, but I wanted to see what the elements were that could have caused that. I mean, was it something could be, maybe if you're very, very detailed with it all, you can maybe recreate it. I don't know. That's instantly where I go. So, if this is the case, if we are moving into a, well, actually, let me back up. If I had no belief, or didn't even give psychic abilities a second thought, and I was thinking this, what is my belief in it, or my interest in it? Does it make it where I can be more susceptible to it? Do you think?
Certainly, that's just the normal process of a subset of neuro-linguistic programming, though, called sensitization.
Yes.
As soon as you buy a particular brand of car, that's all you can see on the freeway for the next week or two.
True.
That kind of a deal, right? And it happens constantly, the human mind, and it has to do with our ability to be pattern receivers and to think in terms of patterns. A lot of people are walking around thinking basically in terms of light as a particle, but our minds are really geared to think of light in terms of the wave that it's in, and to recognize waves and patterns. It's just a basic survival instinct.
Yes.
And as we go forward into more technological age, a lot of those patterns are left behind to our detriment, because those patterns that we used to use in the jungle and in the beaches and so forth, keeping alive, finding food, and so on, can be put to use in our new technological environment and our new understanding of how the universe works to perceive patterns at deeper and deeper levels. And that really, I think, is when you get to the point of enlightenment, you've perceived the ultimate all pattern.
Yes.
And you can just see it all. You see beyond the 40 frames per second, and you're actually perceiving or existing and experiencing the 22 trillion times a second.
Huh. Very interesting. All right, we're at the bottom of the hour. Got to jump out, take a quick break here, and well, it's very, it's on two levels. It's really exciting. It's really exciting to think that us as a species may be entering an age. We talk about this little aspects of our DNA that scientists have no idea what this little bit of DNA does, that has resisted mutation throughout human history, and they don't understand why. They don't know what it does. They don't understand how it has resisted mutation compared to the rest of our DNA. And as we get closer to this 2012 thing, could it be possible that this DNA could be activated to it? We don't know. We'll talk about that a little bit when we return. Stick around, everybody. It's Paranormal Radio. I'm your host, Captain Jack, and we'll be back right after the bottom of the hour news. Stick around. and we're going to get back to it here. Cliff, welcome back.
I'm still here.
Wow, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at an email that says, "Hey Jack, could you ask your guest if there is any evidence whatsoever that the October 14th UFO sighting over Alabama is going to come to pass?"
No, we find, see, here's the thing, we don't count words, but we're aware of the conscious memes that are floating around there, the thought viruses that are out and about on the internet.
Yes.
Because they come up we do have a process of discarding most of the words we actually pick up, because any conscious expression of this kind of stuff, we don't really want to get. We're after the subconscious or the collective archetype. But the stuff we have around it suggests that it will not. Simply because the nature of the source. And see, there's the problem. You get back to that instance of the 40 frames per second in a 22 trillion frame per second universe.
Yes.
And if you perceive beyond the 40 frames, well, let's go right back to your example here with the truck.
Yes.
Basically, what occurred to you was that for that brief period of time, you were perceiving beyond your usual limitation of 40 frames per second, and you got a glimpse of what was going to happen in the future, and it manifested in front of you substantially enough in order to be able to prove itself to you that this was an actual prescient occurrence. Whether you think you created it or not is outside of the bounds of the exposure of reality.
Yes.
There's the problem, though. That instantly came up in your mind. So, say that someone perceives the giant UFO showing up, and they have an adequate or an actual perception of that is as real as your perception of that truck. Only they cannot effectively, within time, know where that setting is going to be. So the mind instantly starts intruding and throwing things around. It wants to assist. It's a nasty little critter, a terrible, terrible master, but a semi-decent slave if you get it under control. But a lot of people that are perceiving beyond 40 frames per second are having trouble getting their mind under control. And so, boom, there you go, a date's attached. Prophecy is made. People get whipped up, and nothing happens.
Yes. If you got if we're thinking about the 40 frames per second, if two people are focused on the same thing, wouldn't that increase it to 80 frames per second? And thus,
no, it doesn't work that way.
No,
it's like being in a movie theater.
Okay.
If everybody in the movie theater is perceiving the same thing, it's still being shown at 40 frames per second. There's limitations on the hardware. Bear in mind that your wetware, if we will, the actual brain, eyes, and all of this kind of thing, in spinal and so on, is all composed of the same non-material substance that you're attempting to perceive. So it gets into this very tricky thing that leads you quickly into the very depths of Zen and Buddhism and all these kind of meditation traditions and the actual technologies involved.
Right.
And it's very difficult to go beyond that 40 frames per second. Now, what it does do is this. The two people or more people focusing on the same subject may not increase the frames per second rate of anybody's perception, but they may solidify the amount of energy that goes into the manifestation there. So, in other words, it's kind of a weird way of looking, a very complex way of looking at the old question of if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around, is there a sound?
Yes.
Okay, now imagine it at a much higher level where we're saying if the powers that be threw a false flag operation and blew a big hole in the desert in Utah and none of us knew about it, would we care?
Good point.
But if all of a sudden we're all focused on it, maybe then it starts taking on more of a perceptual reality because it's intruding on our emotions, which kind of like amplify each other and so on.
True.
And so it's a matter of manipulation of emotions from their viewpoint. That is to say, the powers that be.
Yes. Well, I know that if an accident happens on a street corner and let's say 10 people see it, as you go around, you interview each person. Everyone has, from a different vantage point, a little bit of different perception of what exactly happened. We even see this in courtrooms sometimes when people go up on the witness stands.